So what I want to talk about now is the scientific literature. So the basic idea here is people do research, find out cool stuff, and it's only as useful for the greater community and the greater world as other people know what they did and what they found out and can build on it. At this point, most scientific questions that are interesting are so big, they are not something that one person can do on their own. Instead, lots of people work on one little piece of it and they share their results through conferences and through scientific publications, and everybody builds off of other people's work. And together, everybody's research, starts creating a larger narrative, a larger story and understanding of any topic. So it's just an important part of the scientific process is publishing and sharing your results. And it's also really useful when, anybody, me or you, is interested in looking at, well, what have people done in a particular topic? What have people found when people more rigorously look at something? And there's really nice tools that you can use to go out there and see what research has been done. So we're going to talk about that right now. We're going to talk about kind of just the layout of the literature, what is out there, what you can trust more or less, how you search it. We will do a homework assignment that's a small little one. That's just to get your feet wet. I'll also introduce your bigger research project, which you don't have to worry about that much yet, but you might want to start thinking about like what topic you're interested in looking at and things like that. So let's talk about the scientific literature. So this is just kind of the term, literature sounds like you're reading Nabokov or something, but we're talking here the scientific literature, which is basically records. It's kind of like the stuff you're writing in your lab notebook, but then prettied up and sent out for larger scientific consumption. And it comes in a variety of different tiers. So let's talk about the primary references. So primary references, this is referring to scientific articles that are written by the actual people who did the research. So you're getting the results from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And also they are typically published in what are called peer-reviewed journals. So this is important. This is like the big difference between just going on to your own website and writing whatever you want, right? I could go on to my own website and write that, I don't know, eating Pepperidge Farm goldfish is the best thing you can do if you want to maintain like a healthy weight and cardiovascular health. And, because I've got a PhD, I'm telling you that. It's like people can talk shit. They can write whatever, put whatever they want out there, and they often do. Peer-reviewed journals, on the other hand, you submit your study, your results, and the journal then takes that and gives it to other scientists that are in the same field, and they look over what you have written. They assess, does this seem responsibly done? Usually there's actually two things. If you submit your research to a journal, they're going to look first, is it appropriate? There's so many different journals. There's journals just about gastroenterology, or just about hearing, or just about cardiovascular health, or just about neuroscience. So they're going to say, is this actually going to be relevant to our journal? They're going to look, is it scientifically worthy to actually be put out there? There it depends on, there's different tiers of journals. There's like top tier journals like Science or something. And then there's like much lower tier journals where they'll like publish almost anything. Then they send it out to these other scientists, and sometimes they'll look at it and look at your work and say, this is bad science, and reject it. Even if it's accepted, it's rarely accepted just as is. Usually they send back a bunch of comments where you have to do revisions, like, your control, this is kind of weird here, this bubble that happened in the trial 6, and there's like, you didn't really talk about it, and that makes me nervous about everything. And like, you need to do some other controls to really make me trust that there's no reactions when there's no substrate here. So you have to go back and do some more experiments, things like that. They'll send you back to do more control experiments, or to discuss something more in depth that you kind of glossed over, and actually they're worried but there's something interesting here and you didn't talk about it. But the point is that you can't just pull something out of your butt and publish it and say it's out there in the world. It has this level of professional evaluation that it goes through before it actually gets published. So when you and I then are reading this, we have more trust that you still have to be a sophisticated consumer of information. There's stuff that gets published, that is a little sketchy. So you don't want to just trust it at face value. You still want to use your own skills. That's part of why we're doing this in our class, is because you're going to go off into your world over the next like 50 years in your professional reading this or that. And you want to make sure you are good at deciding whether or not you should trust this or be suspicious. So that's primary references. These are the most trustworthy in general, because they are coming from the actual people who did it. You're not getting like a game of telephone where I think this person meant to say this, and I'm telling you what this other person is actually saying. At every stage that you have somebody else telling someone else's story, there's a chance that the story is getting distorted. So here, since we're actually hearing what the actual people say that did it, plus we can actually read their procedures, see their actual data, and then read their interpretations of that data and decide if we agree with their interpretations of the data. As soon as you get away from this, there's the chance that there's distortion because somebody is telling a third person's story. That being said, primary references tend to be very like jargon heavy, very detailed in the field that they're written in. It's really hard to even understand what the heck's going on in that paper if you're not an expert in that field. Also, there's often a lot of different studies about a topic, and it's overwhelming to try to look at it all and make sense of it all. A lot of times they're contradictory. You often get primary references that come to different conclusions about the same objective, the same question. That's not uncommon, because a few of things. We talked about the randomness. It could be type 1 or type 2 errors. It could be there's some slight difference in the way they approached the question that actually made a difference that they didn't realize. It's hard to know. But if you really want to get a sense of what's going on in terms of the scientific research, you have to look at a variety, look at across the different studies and see, do they all seem to converge on a similar story? Or is there a lot of disagreement, in which case we still got to spend some time before the dust settles here? So what is a really useful thing are what are called secondary references. These are review articles. You will probably find these very helpful when you're doing your projects. The idea of a review article is you typically have somebody who's still an expert in a particular field and goes and looks at, okay, what's the current status of the field right now? Let's look at all these different studies that have been done looking at these particular questions. And let's put it in the context and say, like, here's what seems to be the take-home message right now from all these different studies that are all looking at the same thing. These tend to be more accessible, easier to kind of understand. Plus, you get to see the big picture. Because in primary reference, they might say, fiber has nothing to do with colon cancer. Another one is like, fiber seems to be correlated with colon cancer. And you read those two and you're not sure what to make of it. The review article will talk about, out of the 50 studies that have looked at it, that there seems to be some debate, but in general, it seems to be correlated with less incidence of colon cancer or something, whatever. I'm making that up. But having a review article gives you a little more of a bird's eye view of all the different research that's happening in a particular field, rather than looking at one particular research article, which is going to have their own quirks and their own conclusions. Just like in our lab, any one particular group might have a story that doesn't agree with another group's results. But the more and more groups you look at all together, you can usually find, is there some consistent story that's coming out of it all? So these two are both going to be important when you are doing your research projects. These primary references, and then the secondary, the review articles, which tend to be published in the scientific journals and are one step removed from the first person reports. It's still talking about the different studies that have been done. 3, tertiary references. This is like textbooks.
p.m.
So textbooks, textbooks are good because they tell you lots of stuff across a huge, and we have our human physiology textbook. No one human being can be an expert in all the different aspects of human physiology. I know a little about a lot of things, and then a lot about a little part of neuroscience. The idea of tertiary references is they're really useful, but they're not a place you really want to go for the last word on something. D. Unglaub Silverthorne is not an expert in every aspect of physiology, so I wouldn't trust her textbook as the last word. If I'm saying something for sure, this is what is true, or the current status of our knowledge about human body. The other text that we used before her was Lauralee Sherwood, who's an expert in kidney physiology, renal physiology. So if she had something to say about the kidney, she's going to be solid. If she had something to say about the brain, I would trust myself over her, because that's just the nature of it. Nobody can be an expert in everything. So textbooks, while they're really useful, if you are actually trying to support something you're writing, some scientifically supported paper, research paper you're writing, the textbooks should not be a reference that you tend to go to. You might find them useful once in a while, but they should not be a major source, because they are even more distanced from the people who actually discovered the actual results they're actually relating to you. And then beyond that, you get the media. This is where I used to just be very like free form and flippant in my making fun of the media, until like the last 4 years, in which case it's like I've been giving lots of money to the New York Times and Washington Post and making sure the media stays alive and keeps doing their job. Because the whole thing of people trying to make there be no, so what I'm trying to say is, the media should not be your last place, should not be your only place to get information. And if you read something, you want to double check it then. You don't want to just stop there. I read it, in the San Francisco Chronicle, and now I can just move on because I know the truth. Partly because, they do need to try to make things a little more like sensationalistic often. I have a couple of, in fact, let me bring these up. I have some examples. This is from a long time ago, and I'm going to pick on the San Francisco Chronicle because that's what I was getting at home at the time. But I will show you some fascinating things here. This was from a long time ago, but this kind of gives you a sense of why you need to be careful about the getting your data from the paper. This was from the Chronicle 30 years ago. And it's in the Chronicle from the New York, related from the New York Times. So this is going out, surprising results of impotence study. So the headlines pull you in, and then you read the, you read the first sentence, and it's like, the largest study of impotence since the Kinsey report has found about half of American men over 40 have experienced the problem, federally financed, blah, blah, blah. And then you get down to the third sentence. Usually people have busy lives, like, okay, impotence study. And it's like, wow, half of the men in America got it. And then they move on. You don't have time to keep going. If you do make it down to the third line, it's like, because the survey was regional and not national, its finding cannot be accurately extrapolated to the country. Even though the first freaking sentence says half of American men, right? So it's like, whoever's writing this is not being very responsible. They are taking what is an actual study, and I'm sure the authors of that study were much more responsible in interpreting what they could actually responsibly claim. But the people who write for the newspaper are not as sophisticated and tend to make it sensational. Not that long after this one, there was like another one. Usually sex and drugs tend to be the things that get funniest when you start looking at all this. Pot. This was another one from the Chronicle. This is from 21 years ago. pot found to be bad for middle-aged hearts. And again, there's like this thing that's really drawn people in. It's like, oh my God, let's see. Doctors already know marijuana is bad for the heart. Now they've determined that smoking marijuana may be a middle-aged, may be a bigger risk factor. Adding, the marijuana use growing list of pleasures may trigger heart attacks. So again, the first two sentences are like, whoa. And then if you get to the third sentence again, it's the same as physical exertion and about, a little higher than sex. So this could have been, say, pot is bad for your heart as exercise or sex. It's like, what? So I'm just kind of putting that out there, that often this is where I find my first exposure to some studies or something that's happening in science. And you want to make sure that you don't just stop there and just go on with your life and think you know the whole story. Then what you're going to do is go back and actually, all right, wait, I can look here. And it's like, oh, middlemen. There, I have an author, and a journal. I can actually go back and I can find the primary reference. I can see, what did this guy actually do? What did he actually find? What is it actually saying? Is it something I care about or not? So when you are going to come across studies in more popular media like this, make sure that you realize that things are often distorted to make it a little more kind of sexy and draw people's attention in, and like, and it's gotten even worse. This was before there was the web. Now there's the whole freaking clickbait thing where they'll make it sound like there's something crazy amazing just so you click through, because that's how they get paid, is ads. If you click and then you get there and it's just like something totally stupid and irrelevant. So it's gotten worse. What I would say is, was always bad and it's gotten worse. Okay, I need to clear this now.
I just had a quick question on how far back we should be going for articles or any media that we use or research. Isn't it supposed to be like within the 10-year range, or?
It depends.
Okay.
I mean, in general, it's good to find things that aren't that old, because a lot of times the story does change. That being said, there are papers from the 50s that are still seminal papers that people reference constantly. There's some, there's stuff from the Greek times that is still really relevant and useful to think about, or from thousands of years ago. Just because something has done a long time ago doesn't mean it doesn't have great value still. That being said, you should make sure that there hasn't been more modern research that has superseded things.
Okay.
Right. So I'd say both. So like your homework assignment is 12. We have time to do this. I'm going to share. There's this. Okay. So literature search homework. In any research project, it is important to learn what has previously been discovered by research in that area. Whenever you're doing any kind of study, you want to find out, what have people already learned about this? What do I have to build upon? It's going to help me frame my question, design my experiments, not retread over ground that people have already figured out. Pubmed is, it used to be like, when I first started this stuff, I used to go to the library, there'd be all books, and I'd have to go in these huge, the Index Medicus, and look at all these big bound things, trying to like cross-reference things, and then go down into the stacks and find articles from journals, and it's a pain in the butt. And then it got turned into a big computer database, but it was only available in universities who had enough money to pay for it. And now it is actually available to everybody, funded by the National Institute of Health and the National Library of Medicine, Pubmed, which I'm going to show you more about in just a few moments. So this is going to be one of the good access points to search all of the scientific literature, having to do with like medical things, and see what's out there. Again, I'll show you more details in a few moments. There are other ways to go as well. Google Scholar is actually useful as well. Our library has, I think, InfoTrack or whatever. It has its other databases that you can search, which are also useful. So there's more than one like way to skin a cat here, but you should definitely know PubMed, because that is kind of the premier access point to most of the scientific literature. And again, I will talk about it in more detail in a little bit. Right here, searching the literature is an art you will need to become familiar with. You will have to be skillful in choosing your keywords. So this is kind of like using Google. If you're trying to I really like trying to figure out where I'm going to get that like cool thing that I saw that person have. It's like, okay, what thing? If you're going to find out where to buy it, you need to have a word to describe it so you can pull up the right pages that show you where it's being sold. And it's like, oh, it was kind of like a suitcase. No, it was not. It's like a briefcase. It's more for like office papers. And like the more you start searching around and you get the right words that hone you in on what you're actually interested in, the more likely you're going to pull up articles that are actually exactly what you're interested in. So it's really common to first start with more general terms and get stuff that you're not interested in, but then find the words that people tend to use in the field to talk about what you want to learn about, and then start using those words as your new keywords. And then you're more likely to pull up stuff that's more focused. This is not your assignment. This was the assignment from like before, was like, look at this, like, red wine, people say it's good for cardiovascular health. You're supposed to use, so that is not yours. Yours, I got a new one for you. Let me find it.
The hit one?
What's that?
Is it the hit one?
Yeah, so I will show that to you in just a sec. All right, this one. All right. Someone tells you that high intensity interval training is a superior and more time efficient method to achieve fat loss and overall health compared with traditional moderate exercise regimens. Again, this skill that we're learning here is useful for all sorts of stuff. Whether, it's like, because people are going to tell you stuff all the time, like, oh, this is what you should be doing. Okay. Hold on. People are going to tell you that this diet or that diet is better for you, or that green tea is going to be good for you, or that oats are good for you, or whatever. And you want to know, like, or Red Bull gives you wings. And sometimes I have students actually look into energy drinks and see, does Red Bull actually seem to improve your performance on things? There can be lots of things you're kind of curious about. And then you want to know, have anybody looked at this rigorously? And if they have, what have they found? So this one is high intensity interval training, as opposed to doing more kind of traditional kind of things. And your job is investigate the scientific literature. Have people actually looked at this? And I can say I did a quick little search, and I wouldn't have given you this assignment if nobody had looked at it. People have looked at it. Does the research support the claim? Again, you can reference both primary research and review articles. Do not go into Men's Fitness magazine, like, high intensity training for your future or whatever, popular article. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for people who've done scientific research where they are having a controlled experiment and looking at the results. So briefly summarize your findings and be sure to document your references using the Harvard referencing system, which I'll talk about in just a second. This is not supposed to be a big, crazy research paper. This is just supposed to get your feet wet. There's going to be more references out there than you need to actually use. You should try to, if there's conflicting results, you should at least get a couple of the different ones that have different conflicting results. So you get a sense of the broader story that's out there. You are not trying to, it's not like a debate team where you're trying to argue one side or argue the other side. It's quite the opposite. You want to show, if there are many sides, you want to make sure that you represent that it's a kind of an ambiguous answer right now. It says you should have a minimum of 4 references to support your claims. It also says this should not be longer than a page or so. I really want you to, I don't want you to, this to be a rabbit hole. Your main research project, that'll be a rabbit hole. This one is gonna just get your feet wet. And once you do this, I can give you feedback, and I find that this helps people get a sense of how this works. And if they need feedback, I can give them feedback here before they, have problems with their main assignment later. So this shouldn't be more than a page. I can kind of show you, in fact, here, here, these are things like for the red wine one. Oh, no, hold on. Oh no, I see what's going on here. La, 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 la. Oh, this is what I was going to show you. Okay, we're going to go back in the COM. La, 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 la. Here we go. All right, like here, these are things that people were doing. When this one had to do with green tea. The Harvard referencing or inline references mean that whenever you make some point that's not just common knowledge, like the consumption of green tea has been found to prevent multiple types of cancer, you have to say, according to who? What research paper says that I can go back to and see where you got that information? So we can look, and it says, Ku, Cho, et al. Should say et al, not et al, but 2004. So then, if I go into their list of references, they would then have the full reference there. But several clinical trials and studies have shown that green tea may reduce the risk of chronic diseases. Zaveri et al. 2006. So this would be a study by this Zaveri from 2006 that they got this information from. Let me kind of show. Who et al. 2020 explain how green tea has these types of certain catechin that have health benefits. So basically, whenever you say anything, you have to support it with where is the article you got that information from. And it's in this kind of inline reference like this. I can show you some more. let's see this, let me zoom it. Right, new studies show that drinking red wine in moderation contributes to beneficial effects such as cardiovascular disease. Rachel Golan et al. 2019. And then we go down to the references, and we find there is Golan, Gepner, Shai, Wine Health New Evidence is the name of the article, European Journal of Clinical Nutrition 2019. And so basically, as you find the articles that actually are going to help you answer your thing, you have to kind of get the core information, which you're going to have in the list of references at the end. And then in the text that you're writing, you have to make sure that whenever you say something, you tell me what article did you get it from. So you kind of connect your important points with the actual paper that you're getting the thing from. So for instance, I could go, let me go into Pubmed. So here I'm in Pubmed, which is the entryway into this database that has thousands and thousands of medical journals. And it works kind of like Google, except instead of just finding web pages, it's going to find scientific articles for you. So let's say I'm curious, does Red Bull give you wings? I want to know about Red Bull and athletic performance. So I'm going to say like, I don't know, Red Bull. Let's do something let's do energy drink. I could do Red Bull. Let's start with Red Bull. Although that's probably, Red Bull and athletic performance maybe.
Oh.
So first thing I can say, like, oh, actually, this actually looks pretty good. Effects of Red Bull energy drink on human performance and mood. And a couple of things. One is, energy drink. That was actually a useful thing, energy drink, because energy drink is more generic. So actually, I could probably use that on my next search, use energy drink instead of Red Bull. Like I said, using these, as you start finding things, you'll find other search terms that are going to be helping you find stuff in the future. So pay attention to the terms that come up that seem common in the field. You're going to usually get lots of things coming up. The first thing you do is you scan down the titles. This one sounds good, effects of Red Bull on human performance. As I look at, oh my God, high intensity interval and moderate training for improving cardio. This is actually going to be useful later on. Red Bull and sprint performance, that's also good. So sometimes you get things that are not that useful.
Sweetie.
Make sure
Yes,
you,
sweetie.
I think it's Sarah now. There we go. Energy beverages, content and safety. I don't care about safety, right? Right now, I just want to know, is it going to make me like jump higher? Long-term consumption induces biochemical alterations in heart muscle. That's also not useful, right? So you're going to have to go and find the ones that are interesting for you. Once you do, you can click on the title and that will take you to the abstract. The abstracts are your friend. The abstract is the paper in a nutshell. It's basically, what did they do? How did they do it? What did they find? Instead of you reading a big, complicated scientific paper, you can get the gist of it by reading the abstract. For most of what you're going to need to do, both on this assignment and even on your main assignment, this is all you need. All you need is the abstract, which will give it. Sometimes you'll want more than the abstract, in which case you can get the whole article. But here we can take a look. Effects of Red Bull were examined in 36 volunteers. Assessments included psychomotor performance, reaction time, concentration, memory, alertness, physical endurance. When compared with control drinks, Red Bull energy drinks significantly improved aerobic endurance and anaerobic performance on cycle ergometers, significant improvements in mental performance, including choice reaction time, concentration, and memory, which reflected increased subjective alertness. This is consistent with wide-ranging improvements in performance and interpreters reflecting that Red Bull does indeed give you wings, right? So, when you see something like this, you're going to then probably want to go deeper. Like, who financed this? Was this like the Red Bull company? And you want to look at more things. This one is just like unapologetically saying, go Red Bull. If we go back here, Red Bull versus caffeine, we get to the end, no significant difference in mean heart rating or preserved existence in the treatment study. Demonstrates moderate dose of caffeine consumed with either Red Bull or in an anhydrous form enhanced cycling performance. The ergogenic benefits of Red Bull, therefore, most likely due to effects of caffeine. So this one is saying like, okay, Red Bull might help give you wings, but also snorting a line of pure powdered caffeine will do the same thing for you. Doesn't have to be a Red Bull. So the more you look, the more you'll have a more complete story of what is actually going out there. And again, if you are gonna include this article as part of your thing, you need to cite it. It needs to be in your literature at the end. So this is Quinn-Livin and a bunch of other people, you say et al, you'd say Quinn-Livin et al, 2015. And then this little thing, that little quotes that says cite, this is kind of a new feature. It's great. There's a similar thing in Google Scholar. If you want to use Google Scholar, you click on that and you tell it the format. We are going to use the, I think it's the N, it's going to be the NLM method. There it is. Quinn-Livin A, blah, 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 blah. There's the authors, there's the title, the journal, the year. You don't really need this part. But, so you could just cut and paste this as your part for your literature list, your list of literature cited, because it's really nice that they do that for you automatically now. There's different ways. There's AMA, which we are not doing. It's APA, which we are not doing. There's MLA, which we are not doing. This is more common in the humanities. We're going to use this one. And we're going to use these inline references. It's 1229. You have a couple of weeks to do this. So as you get started, I can give you more examples of what it looks like. But, to start, just start searching the literature a bit. Just find a few solid articles. That's all you need for this beginning, this part. You just need a few articles that kind of give you the lay of the land. And then you're going to, in your own words, summarize what these results are out there. But make sure you support your words with where are you getting your information from. You don't want to use direct quotes. You do not want to say, quote, this study, you don't want to say Quinn-Livin said, quote, this study demonstrated that a moderate dose consumed, blah, blah, blah. That's not how science writing works. Instead, you'd say, Quinn-Livin 2015 found that there was no difference between the effects of just pure caffeine and Red Bull, and therefore the caffeine seems mostly responsible for the positive effects we find from Red Bull. Use your own words. Don't use their words. Just kind of paraphrase. But definitely don't cut and paste and not put it. If you cut and paste and don't use quotes, then you get a big 0 for plagiarism. So if you're gonna use their exact words, put them in quotes or else you're in trouble. But stylistically, you'd rather not use quotes. So is that making sense? And again, this is just the beginning of our delving into this. You're going to be doing a major research project looking at something that hopefully you're interested in more detail. People have looked at all sorts of things. In fact, I'll wait until Tuesday to kind of give you more examples because it is already 12:30 right now. But you can start thinking about if there are things you're genuinely interested in your life and you are curious in more depth, what are people finding about it, and what is folk knowledge or just like pop things people talk about versus real. This would be a great opportunity to actually look into it more deeply and get your points that you need for the class. So ideally, it's going to be a win-win. So I will see you all on Tuesday. And again, have one person at least please email me your data from the enzyme lab so I can create a more complete thing and average things out.